we are moving into one of the reasons I said everyone's going to need their synopsis is we are moving into the tough sections now, where we're dealing with that last bit of material, literally only pages left in the study that we've been doing for about 10 years in the Synoptic Gospels. And hence we're encountering the really challenging material, the material that I think, it's funny, when we started this study, I would have had a slightly different view of just how much each one of us needs to know how to answer the objections that are raised to the crucifixion and resurrection narratives than I do now. I say slightly different because I would say that now it's even more important for everyone to be able to give a response because of the advance in the decay of our society and an attack upon the Christian faith, and the fact that the internet allows these kinds of arguments to be so widely disseminated that almost anyone that you talk to anymore, if they want to try to sidetrack or derail a discussion, will start throwing out these objections, and especially because Bart Ehrman and the people who follow him and read his materials and the people who popularize his materials, especially this section. If you've ever listened to Ehrman's presentations, he will run through a whole series of items in the crucifixion and resurrection narratives, and will have the same comment on each. He'll say, well, how many angels were at the tomb? Well, it depends on which manuscript you're reading. And what time in the morning was it? Well, it depends on which manuscript you're reading. And just go through item after item after item. How many times did the rooster crow? And so on and so on and so forth. And unfortunately, for most of us, we haven't spent a lot of time looking at these things, and so it's a little bit difficult to be confident with a response. Well, we don't have, there's no way a parallel like this to avoid dealing with tough subjects over the next number of weeks. And so my suggestion is to get a deep seat in the saddle and to listen carefully and work hard, because there's no way around the fact that we're going to be dealing with some challenging things over the next couple of weeks. We are in section, basically section 331, page 300, in the arrest of Jesus. You'll recall that last week we looked at John 18 specifically in regards to the differences between John's rendering of the arrest, especially in regards to Jesus' use of the phrase "I am," in reference to himself, the falling back of the soldiers / guards. There is obviously some discussion of exactly the identity of this large crowd that comes with the servants of the chief priest and so on and so forth. Well, we only know the name of one, Malchus. That's about the only one that we know. But we looked at some of the differences there. We did not, however, look at Jesus' words "12 legions of angels, but how then should the scriptures be fulfilled? It must be so." At that hour, Jesus said to the crowd, so there you're talking about an entire group that's come out, "Have you come out against a robber with swords and clubs to capture me? Day after day I sat in the temple teaching, and you did not seize me. But all this has taken place, the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled. Then all his disciples forsook him and fled. Now, Matthew gives a fairly full account there. Luke gives most of the address to the crowds. Matthew does not note the healing, but Luke does, just very, very quickly. Instead of the whole discussion of taking the sword or perish by the sword, Jesus said, "No more of this," and he touched his ear and healed him. Then Jesus said to the chief priests and the officers of the temple and the elders, so there you have a little more of identification of who the crowd is, have you come out as against a robber, etc., etc. So once again, as we saw last week, you have different vantage points as to each of the Gospels as to what is being recorded. Interestingly enough, John identifies Simon Peter as the one who the striking. You'll notice in Luke 22, those who were about him thought, "Lord, shall we strike with the sword?" And one of them struck the slave of the high priest and cut off his right ear. But Jesus said, "No more of this," and he touched his ear and healed him. Only John gives the specific information that this is Peter that does this. Now, that may have something, interestingly enough, to do with the discussion of the betrayal, the denials, more like the denials of Peter that come a little bit later on. One of the challenges that we are looking at. But specifically, you have Simon Peter who draws his sword and cuts off the right ear. Both Matthew and Mark don't bother to give us the specifics of which ear it was, but Luke and John do give that specific piece of information. So each one gives us a portion of what is said. And Jesus saying, "No more of this," then add that to put your sword back into its place and create a longer story. And while that might be possible to do, it's still not Matthew's version, Mark's version, or Luke's version, or John's version when you do that. Remember, does anybody remember the ancient work that I mentioned last week, where someone did exactly that? Just happened to stick. I know it's stick.